Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the frozen forests, muddy roads, and candlelit villages of medieval Europe to meet the animal that terrified ordinary people more than almost anything else. It wasn't a dragon, it wasn't a plague, it wasn't even an invading army. It was a creature that waited beyond the tree line, followed shepherds through winter darkness, and haunted the dreams of travellers crossing lonely roads after sunset. Before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy these medieval journeys, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there right now. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and let's discover the deadliest animal that terrorized medieval Europe. Hey guys, tonight you find yourself beneath the leaning arch of a medieval town gate, with cold stone pressing its damp breath into your bones, damp straw clinging to the hem of your cloak, and smoke from evening hearths crawling low beneath the rafters of the guardhouse. Your boots are mud-heavy, your fingers are stiff, and somewhere beyond the misty river a bell rings as if it has been ringing since the beginning of winter. Horse breath ghosts white in the air. Torchlight shivers on iron nails. Medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience, and, gently, honestly, you probably would not last a week out here, not without warmer socks, thicker bread, and a much friendlier relationship with fleas. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while the gate creaks shut, you might tell us where you're listening from, and what the local time is where your own little hearth of the world happens to be. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand just inside the town wall as dusk gathers in the narrow street, and the world around you seems made of damp wool, old timber, and low voices. The last carts are being dragged through the gate before the watchmen lower the bar, their wheels groaning over ruts filled with brown water. A woman with a basket of leeks tucks her chin into her hood. A boy drives 2 geese ahead of him with a stick, though the geese appear to believe they are respected civic officials and move at their own stately pace. Near the wall, rushes have been swept from a guardroom floor and piled in a sour heap, carrying with them the smell of boots, smoke, spilled ale, and men who have spent too much of the day indoors. You've come by the western road, the one that slips between bare fields and a black belt of forest, and already people have asked whether you saw anything behind you. They ask it softly. Not did you pass merchants or is the bridge flooded, but did you see anything? They mean the animal, though most do not name it at once. In a world where words have weight, where saints' names are whispered for protection, and charms are tied into children's sleeves, some folk believe naming a feared thing invites it closer. No one can quite agree whether that is wisdom or merely fear wearing a better cloak. At the brazier, a gatekeeper with a fur-lined collar warms his hands and watches the road through the narrowing gap. He has a beard full of frost and a face like old bread left too near the fire. Beside him hangs a ring of iron keys, each one large enough to look important even when it opens nothing grander than a storage shed. He tells a carter to hurry, then spits into the straw and mutters that the beast has been bold this season. "Wolves," he says at last, because someone must say it. Wolves in the woods, wolves near the sheepfolds, wolves close enough to make dogs whine under the table. You listen while the gate timbers thud into place. The sound rolls through the arch and settles in your chest. Outside, the road fades into river mist and thorn scrub. Inside, the town exhales. Shutters close. A baker's boy carries a tray of coarse loaves across the street, his sleeves dusted white with flour. Somewhere, pottage thickens in an iron pot. Somewhere else, smoked fish hangs from a beam. watched by a cat with the solemn patience of a monk considering eternity. The gatekeeper says the worst began after Martinmas, when the nights grew longer and the last pigs were driven in from the woods. Some swear that a single great wolf leads the others, larger than a calf and pale along the shoulders, clever enough to keep downwind and patient enough to wait by a lonely stile. Others say that is tavern embroidery, stitched after too much ale. In truth, hunger is often less dramatic and more terrible. Snow covers roots, deer move deeper into the trees, sheep, goats, and foolish travellers remain conveniently made of meat. The wolf does not hate mankind. That, perhaps, is what makes it unsettling. It merely notices. You follow the lane inward, past houses with upper stories leaning so near they seem to whisper across the street. Meltwater drips from thatch. A tallow candle burns behind a horn window, blurred and golden. A woman marks her lintel with a bit of chalk and murmurs a charm she learned from her grandmother, though whether it is meant to keep out wolves, fever, thieves, or bad luck in general is difficult to say. Medieval protection often works like a cloak thrown over many worries at once. A dog appears near your heel, rib-thin and yellow-eyed, carrying itself with the quiet confidence of an animal that belongs nowhere and everywhere. It sniffs your boot, judges you disappointing, then follows anyway. You do not encourage it, but neither do you send it off on a night like this. Even a shabby dog feels like company. The town square opens ahead, slick with mud and scattered straw. Market stalls stand empty now, their awnings tied down against the wet. At the centre rises a stone cross, its edges softened by years of rain and hands. Pilgrims have left tokens there, a bent badge stamped with a saint, a scrap of blue thread, a small twist of dried herb. You pause beside it, hearing the monastery bell in the distance answer the town bell, one slow note after another, as if the whole countryside is counting itself before sleep. Near the cross, two shepherds speak with a woman in a dark cloak. One shepherd carries broken crook, the other has tied a wolf tooth on a cord at his throat, though you quietly wonder why a wolf would be frightened by its own spare parts. Still, it hangs there polished from handling, and his fingers keep returning to it. He says 3 lambs were taken near the frozen ditch. The woman says her cousin saw eyes beyond the hedge, green as marsh fire. The first shepherd says eyes are always green when a story's told after sunset. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the town fears one deadly animal, a hungry pack, or the shape that fear makes when it walks ahead of fact. Yet the fear itself is real enough. You feel it in the way people hurry across open ground. You hear it in the way mothers call children indoors before the light has fully gone. You see it in the extra thorn branches dragged against sheepfold gates, in the ash crosses rubbed onto stable doors, in the old men who pretend not to listen while listening to every word. A gust pushes river mist through the street, and the dog presses against your leg. You draw your cloak closer and move toward the glow of an alehouse, where smoke leaks through the roof hole and voices gather low and warm. Behind you, the barred gate holds the night outside, or seems to. Beyond it lie the road, the fields, the black trees, and whatever pads softly between them. And above the town, over wet roofs and soot-black rafters, the evening bell fades into silence. The evening bell is scarcely faded when the weather decides to make itself part of the conversation. Rain begins as a fine drifting mist, almost too polite to notice. Then, as you cross the square with the stray dog still shadowing your steps, it thickens into a steady curtain that rattles softly against shutters and soaks every uncovered shoulder in town. Before long, the gutters overflow, Water runs down the lanes in thin, muddy streams, carrying straw, cabbage leaves, and the occasional lost feather toward the river. You find yourself once again near the gatehouse, drawn there by the promise of shelter and by the simple medieval truth that wherever people are forced to wait, stories tend to gather. The gatehouse is a squat stone building attached to the wall itself. Its lower chamber smells of wet wool, damp leather, wood smoke, and boots that have seen entirely too much road. A small fire burns in an iron basket, doing its best against the chill. Several travellers have crowded inside. A carter sits nearest the warmth, rubbing his hands together. A pilgrim with a broad hat hangs his dripping cloak from a peg. 2 guards lean against the wall beneath racks of spears. An elderly woman occupies a stool near the doorway and looks entirely prepared to outlive everyone else in the room. The dog circles twice before settling beside your boots. Outside, rain drums against the roof. Inside, conversation slowly turns toward the thing everyone has been avoiding naming too often. "Wolves?" says the carter eventually. The word hangs in the smoky air. One guard pokes at the fire. Again. Again! The pilgrim nods grimly. Apparently he has spent the last month walking roads that thread through forests, hills, and villages. His pilgrim badge glints in the firelight. The small lead token shows the image of a saint whose relics are said to cure fevers. Whether they actually do remains a matter of debate. Some swear that touching the relic can heal sickness. Others quietly observe that many people who touched relics still manage to die of ordinary illnesses. Those who tell the tale never fully agree. The pilgrim stretches his legs toward the heat. 3 villages talking of wolves this week alone, he says. 3 villages talk about everything, mutters one guard. A few people laugh. The pilgrim smiles. True enough, but they were frightened. That word lands more heavily. Frightened. Not excited, not curious. Frightened. Rain rattles against the shutters. The elderly woman lifts her head. "When I was a girl," she says, "people feared wolves more than soldiers." The room grows quiet. Everyone respects old stories, especially when told by someone whose face contains enough wrinkles to qualify as historical evidence. She folds her hands in her lap. "In winter," she says, "you watch the tree line. You watched it every day. Snow could hide many things." The fire crackles. No one interrupts. The woman describes a season decades ago when deep drifts covered the countryside for weeks. Sheep disappeared. Dogs vanished. One family found tracks circling their byre morning after morning. Nothing happened. Then one night the wolves came. Not dramatically. Not with snarling attacks and heroic battles. Just quiet hunger. The sort of hunger that medieval people understood all too well. The kind that waited patiently. The room listens. You notice how different these stories are from heroic legends. In songs, or danger arrives with trumpets. In reality, danger often arrives silently and spends a long time being inconvenient. Much like rain, or taxes, or relatives staying longer than expected. The guards exchange knowing looks. The carter chuckles. Even the old woman smiles. A little humour seems necessary when discussing things that genuinely frighten people. One of the guards stands and moves toward a narrow arrow slit overlooking the road. He peers into the darkness. Nothing visible beyond sheets of rain. Still, he remains there a moment longer. Watching, the habit appears deeply rooted. You begin to understand why. In this world, darkness is truly dark. No lamps line the roads. No distant towns glow on the horizon. Beyond the wall lies blackness interrupted only by occasional lanterns and the pale shimmer of water. A person staring into that darkness can imagine almost anything. Sometimes imagination proves far more active than reality. Sometimes not. The guard returns to the fire. "Wolf took a mule near Bracken Ford," he says. The carter grunts. "I heard that. Heard it was 2 wolves. I heard 6. The elderly woman snorts. I heard 12. The pilgrim nods solemnly. By next month there will be 40 and they'll be carrying banners. Laughter fills the room. Even the guards smile. The mood eases. Stories, after all, grow much like ivy. Given enough time, they climb everything. Yet beneath the jokes remains a current of genuine concern. You see it whenever conversation pauses. You hear it whenever rain briefly softens and someone glances toward the door. Fear lives quietly here. Not dramatic. Not constant. Just present. Like a draft beneath an old door. As the evening deepens, more travellers arrive seeking shelter. A merchant enters carrying a lantern. 2 farm labourers squeeze inside. A young monk appears with a basket covered by cloth. Steam escapes when he lifts the cover. Bread. Warm bread. The reaction is immediate and heartfelt. No king has ever received a warmer welcome than fresh bread on a wet evening. The monk distributes loaves while accepting grateful blessings from nearly everyone present. The dog receives a piece as well. Its opinion of humanity improves noticeably. You eat slowly. The bread is coarse and dark, made from mixed grains. It tastes wonderful. Perhaps because you are hungry. Perhaps because medieval life teaches appreciation through scarcity. The monk settles near the fire. Ink stains darken his fingers. You suspect he spends more time with manuscripts than wolves? Even so, he has heard stories. Monasteries often collect information almost accidentally. Pilgrims arrive. Merchants stop. Travellers talk. News accumulates. The monk mentions that several abbeys have recorded increased wolf sightings during harsh winters. Not because wolves suddenly become evil, simply because food becomes harder to find. That explanation feels strangely more unsettling. A monster can be hated. Hunger is harder to argue with. The fire burns lower. Outside, rain continues. Inside, people trade tales. Some swear wolves can smell fear. Some claim carrying rowan wood offers protection. Others insist hanging blessed herbs above stable doors discourages predators. No one can quite agree whether any of these remedies actually work. Yet many continue the practices anyway. In uncertain times, rituals provide comfort, and comfort is often worth nearly as much as certainty. Eventually, the storm begins to weaken. The hammering rain softens to dripping water. One by one, travellers prepare to leave. Cloaks are gathered. Lanterns lit. Belts tightened. The elderly woman departs first, moving with surprising speed. The merchant follows. The labourers vanish into the mist. Soon only a handful remain. You step outside. The night air feels colder now. Water gleams on cobblestones. The town lies quiet beneath clouds. Far away, beyond the fields and beyond the unseen forest, something howls. The sound is faint, long, almost swallowed by distance. For a moment no one speaks. The guards look toward the darkness. The monk pauses. Even the dog lifts its head. Then the sound fades, leaving only dripping roofs and cold wind. No one rushes into panic. No one shouts. The howl is simply acknowledged. Another fact of the season. Another reminder that beyond the walls, beyond the torchlight and warm bread and human company, something still moves through the sleeping countryside. You pull your cloak tighter. The dog falls into step beside you. Together you leave the gatehouse behind and walk deeper into the town, while somewhere beyond the reach of bells and firelight, the unseen night continues its patient wandering. You walk toward the alehouse by the market because the town seems to tilt that way after dark, as if every muddy lane, dripping roof, and hungry traveller understands that warmth is not a luxury, but a kind of survival. The sign above the door swings in the wet wind, painted with a boar that looks less like an animal and more like a loaf of bread that has lost patience. Inside, the room glows with firelight and beeswax candles, though most of the candles have burned low enough to look tired of being helpful. Rushes cover the floor, freshly scattered over older rushes, which is a medieval cleaning method best described as optimism with straw. The air is thick with smoke, ale, onions, wet wool, and the comforting smell of pottage simmering somewhere near the hearth. You duck beneath a beam polished by countless heads and find a place along the wall. The stray dog slips in before anyone can object, which suggests long practice. A serving girl with red hands and a wool cap sets a wooden cup before you, then a trencher of coarse bread softened with stew. The stew is mostly beans, leeks, and a mysterious bit of meat that has chosen anonymity. You do not question it. In a place like this, questions can make supper smaller. Around you sit merchants, shepherds, apprentices, 2 tanners with stained sleeves, a woman selling pins and ribbons, and a broad-shouldered butcher whose apron has been washed often but not successfully. Their voices rise and fall in a sleepy murmur. Dice click near the hearth. A man coughs into his sleeve. Someone complains about market tolls, and several others nod with the weary devotion people reserve for ancient injustices. Then the talk bends, as talk has bent all evening toward the wolf shadow beyond the fields. A wool merchant says 3 packs have been counted near the northern ridge. A shepherd says no, not 3 packs. 1 pack and 1 lone brute large enough to leap a hurdle without touching it. The butcher grunts that any animal becomes larger when described by a man who ran away from it. This earns a soft ripple of laughter, though the shepherd only touches the little charm sewn into his sleeve. It is a pouch of linen, no bigger than a walnut, tied with green thread. Inside, he says, is a shaving of rowan, a pinch of salt, and words written by a clerk who knew a priest's cousin. Some swear such charms keep wolves from crossing a threshold. Others swear the same charm failed utterly in the village of Elmbrook, though no one can quite agree whether the charm was tied properly, blessed properly, or merely expected to do too much for its size. You sip your ale. It is cloudy, sour, and safer than water, which is a very medieval way for a drink to become popular. Near the fire, a merchant lays out what he has lost, not blood and battle, not legend and nightmare, but money. 2 pack horses frightened into a ditch, 1 mule bitten badly enough that it now refuses bridges, puddles, shadows, and possibly life as a concept, a bundle of cloth ruined in the mud, delayed arrival at market, extra fee at the bridge, toll at the west gate, toll again for weighing, toll apparently for the privilege of discovering one is poorer than before. The wolf has not touched him directly, yet it has entered his purse. That is how fear travels in the Middle Ages. It moves through roads, prices, meals, and rumours. A shepherd loses lambs, so wool grows dear. A cart comes late, so salt is scarce. A hunter refuses the forest, so charcoal costs more. 1 animal pads through the dark, and by morning half the town pays for it. The tanners listen closely, for hides follow death in all its forms. One of them says wolfskins fetch a fair price in hard winters, especially if a lord offers bounty. The other says a wolf pelt hung near a stable may frighten off wolves. The butcher laughs softly and says that sounds like hanging a thief's hat over your door to discourage thieves. Still, He admits his grandmother kept a wolf tooth under the churn to protect butter from souring. Though whether the tooth helped the butter or simply made the household feel serious is unknown. Those who tell the tale never fully agree. A bell rings somewhere outside, muffled by roof and rain. Not the great town bell, but a smaller one, perhaps from a chapel or a watchman making his round. Its note passes through the alehouse like a hand smoothing a blanket. People fall quiet for a breath, then return to their cups. The woman selling pins leans toward you and tells of a village where children are sent to gather sticks only in pairs now. They carry iron nails in their pockets, because iron troubles evil things, and because adults like giving children small objects when they cannot give them certainty. She says the village priest blessed the sheepfold with holy water last week. The sheep were unimpressed but damp. Still, the people slept better. You notice how often sleep is the true prize in these stories. Not victory, not revenge. Sleep. To close the door, bank the fire, hear the wind at the shutters, and believe for a few hours that the dark will remain outside. Your dog, for you've begun privately calling it your dog despite having made no formal arrangement, rests beneath the bench with its nose on its paws. Its ears twitch whenever the word wolf is spoken. Perhaps it understands. Perhaps it only hopes someone will drop more bread. Even now, it is hard to tell whether animals are wiser than people or merely less likely to explain themselves. A young apprentice asks why wolves come so close if they fear men. The butcher wipes his knife on a cloth and answers without looking up. They fear hunger less. The room receives this as truth. Outside, the rain stops entirely. Water drips from the eaves in slow beads. The alehouse grows warmer, softer. More trenchers arrive. Someone shares smoked fish wrapped in cloth. Someone else produces a heel of cheese hard enough to threaten dental ruin. Cups are filled again, and the stories loosen. Now the wolf becomes larger. Now it has eyes like lanterns. Now it follows travellers for 7 miles. Now it knows which door has a broken latch. Now it walks around roadside shrines but never crosses fresh grave earth. The monk from the gatehouse appears briefly near the door, shaking rain from his sleeves. His ink-stained fingers clutch a wax tablet, and he listens without seeming to listen. You remember how monasteries collect news. Perhaps tomorrow the Abbey record will mention sightings, losses, weather, and a note that common fear increases after poor harvests. Or perhaps it will say simply, wolves troublesome. Medieval writing can be wonderfully brief when the scribe is cold. At last the fire settles low. The alehouse keeper rakes ash across the embers and warns everyone not sleeping there to find their beds before the streets grow meaner. You rise, heavy with warmth, stew, and half-formed images of pale shapes slipping between hedges. The dog stretches, yawns, and follows. When you step outside, the market square is nearly empty. The stalls crouch under tied awnings. The stone cross shines with rain. Somewhere beyond the wall, beyond the closed gate, beyond all the little protections of candle, charm, and cup, the forest waits in its wet black silence. You turn toward the narrow lane leading to the pilgrim road, where morning will draw you onward toward the abbey, and the dog pads beside you, as if it has always meant to come. Morning arrives slowly, as if the sun itself is reluctant to leave its blankets. You wake in a loft above a cooper's workshop, where the smell of fresh-cut oak mingles with damp wool and the faint memory of last night's stew. The straw mattress beneath you has all the softness of bundled twigs, yet after a long day on muddy roads it feels remarkably luxurious. The dog has somehow secured the warmest corner near the chimney and looks deeply offended when you rise before dawn. Outside, the town still sleeps beneath a pale veil of mist. A monastery bell sounds in the distance. Then another. And another. The notes drift across fields and rivers, marking the hours as they have for generations. In a world without clocks hanging on every wall, bells divide the day into understandable pieces. People wake by them, pray by them, work by them, and sometimes complain about them while still depending on them completely. You pull on your cloak. The wool remains slightly damp. Everything remains slightly damp. This appears to be one of the great achievements of medieval life. The town gates open shortly after sunrise. Their heavy timbers groan as if personally offended by the responsibility. Farmers enter with carts. A fisherman arrives carrying baskets that smell strongly of river and determination. A pair of pilgrims pass through the gate with staffs in hand and badges sewn to their hats. You join them on the road leading toward the abbey. The dog joins as well. No formal discussion occurs. The arrangement simply continues. The pilgrim road stretches through rolling fields silvered with frost. Thin smoke rises from distant cottages. Hedges divide pasture from pasture. Bare trees stand motionless beneath a sky the colour of old pewter. For a time the journey feels peaceful. Only boots crunching frozen ground. Only breath hanging white in the air. Only the soft creak of leather straps and the distant call of crows. Yet even here, far from town walls, reminders of the wolves linger. The first appears near a roadside shrine. The shrine itself is little more than a stone niche built into a weathered post. Inside stands a painted image of a saint whose features have faded beneath years of rain and candle smoke. At its base someone has left offerings. A ribbon, a few dried flowers, a small wooden carving of a sheep, and eats, somewhat surprisingly, 3 wolf teeth tied together with twine. One pilgrim notices your glance. Protection, he says. Against wolves? Against everything. That answer seems to satisfy him. In medieval Europe, many protective customs operate on a wonderfully broad policy basis. Why defend yourself against one danger when you can attempt to defend yourself against all of them simultaneously? The dog sniffs the shrine. Apparently it remains unconvinced. You continue onward. As the road bends around a low hill, signs of concern become easier to spot. A shepherd has reinforced a fold with fresh thorn branches. Several cottages display bunches of herbs hanging above their doors. One farmhouse has painted small crosses in white chalk beside every window. No one can quite agree whether such measures truly help. Yet they persist. Fear often creates traditions faster than certainty does. By mid-morning you pass a group of villagers repairing a fence. The work appears urgent. New posts, fresh rails, extra bracing. One man explains that wolves rarely challenge sturdy barriers when easier opportunities exist. His companion nods, then adds that wolves also possess an astonishing talent for discovering precisely which section of fence has been neglected. This observation receives universal agreement. The conversation soon turns toward recent sightings. Tracks near the marsh, howls near the forest edge, missing sheep, a frightened horse. Nothing dramatic, nothing legendary, just enough incidents to keep anxiety alive. That pattern itself seems important. The deadliest animal is not necessarily the one seen every day. Sometimes it is the one seen rarely enough to remain mysterious. The road gradually approaches woodland. Dark pines gather along the horizon. Leafless oaks twist above tangled undergrowth. The fields narrow. Shadows deepen. Even the air feels different here. Cooler. Still, the pilgrims speak more quietly. You notice it without anyone mentioning it. People lower their voices round forests, perhaps because trees absorb sound. Perhaps because forests have always encouraged imagination. The dog remains alert. Its ears flick constantly. Its nose samples every current of air. At one muddy stretch of path it suddenly stops. The pilgrims stop as well. You look down. Tracks. Not fresh. Not dramatic. But unmistakable. Several paw prints preserved in drying mud. The impressions cross the road and disappear into brush. Everyone studies them. No one says much. The tracks are simply evidence. Quite evidence. The sort that settles deeper than stories. One pilgrim kneels briefly. "Wolf," he says. The other nods. Then everyone continues walking. There is something strangely medieval about that response. The tracks exist. The danger exists. The journey continues anyway. People still need to reach markets, monasteries, villages, fields. Life rarely pauses simply because risks are present. Ahead, the road enters a stretch of woodland. Tall trunks rise around you. Needles soften the ground. Birdsong becomes sporadic. A squirrel scolds someone unseen. Sunlight filters through branches in pale shafts. For a while the forest seems almost welcoming. Then you notice something else. Silence. Not complete silence, but gaps. Long pauses between sounds. The absence of movement where movement might normally be expected. The pilgrims notice it too. One quietly recites a prayer. The other touches the pilgrim badge hanging at his chest. You remember stories from the gatehouse and alehouse. Missing livestock. Hungry winters. Tracks. Howls. Fear travels these roads alongside everyone else. Some swear wolves can sense nervous travellers. Others insist wolves care little about human emotions and far more about human livestock. The second explanation feels more plausible. The first remains more popular. Halfway through the woodland stands a weathered marker stone. Someone long ago carved a cross into its surface. Someone else later added several protective symbols around it. A third person appears to have scratched a wolf shape nearby. Layers of belief resting atop one another. Faith. Superstition. Memory. Warning. No one can quite agree which came first. You pause there briefly. The dog drinks from a puddle. One pilgrim shares a piece of coarse bread. The other studies the trees. Far off, hidden somewhere among the dark trunks, a raven calls. The sound echoes strangely, then fades. The road finally emerges from the woodland around midday. Fields open once more. The sudden sunlight feels almost startling. Ahead, beyond pasture and orchard, the abbey appears. Grey stone walls. A bell tower. Sloping roofs. Thin columns of smoke rising into the pale sky. The sight brings visible relief to your companions. Monasteries provide more than prayer. They offer shelter, food, news, safety, records. In uncertain regions, they function almost like islands of order. As you descend toward the abbey, another reminder of the wolves appears. A small flock grazes near the road. Two shepherds watch them closely. Very closely. One carries a staff tipped with iron. The other keeps 3 large dogs nearby. The animals patrol constantly, scanning distant hedgerows. Their vigilance says as much as any rumour. The shepherds wave politely as you pass. Yet their eyes continue returning to the horizon. Always watching, always measuring distances, always aware of what might emerge from the far tree line. The abbey bells begin ringing again. Their deep notes roll across the countryside. The sound feels steady, grounded, human. For a moment the concerns of roads and forests seem farther away. But only for a moment. Because beyond the fields, beyond the grazing sheep, Beyond the smoke rising from cottage chimneys, the forest remains. And somewhere within that forest, hidden beneath winter branches and pale daylight, the creatures that haunt every conversation continue moving through their own quiet world. You and your companions draw closer to the abbey gates, where shelter, stories, and new questions wait. The abbey gates stand open when you arrive, though open in a medieval sense still suggests enough oak and iron to discourage armies, tax collectors, and enthusiastic livestock. You pass beneath the archway and enter a world that feels different from the road. Not warmer exactly. Nothing in this season seems particularly interested in becoming warm, but calmer, more ordered. The noise of the countryside softens behind thick stone walls. Bells continue their measured conversations overhead. Cloaked figures move between buildings with the quiet purpose of people who always know what hour it is. The dog follows you through the gate without invitation and immediately begins investigating monastery life. A novice notices. The novice notices. The dog notices the kitchen. Both pursue their respective duties with admirable dedication. The abbey itself rises from the centre of the enclosure, its grey stone damp from recent rain. Nearby stand workshops, barns, gardens sleeping beneath winter frost, and long guest buildings intended for pilgrims and travellers. One of these guest houses soon becomes your destination. The guest master, a broad-faced monk with kind eyes and permanently ink-stained sleeves, welcomes newcomers with the calm efficiency of a man who has spent years dealing with muddy travellers. He records names, or approximate names, or names that sound convincing enough. Medieval record-keeping occasionally demonstrates a flexible relationship with spelling. After all, if 6 scribes write your name 6 different ways, perhaps all 6 versions become correct. The monk leads you into the guest house. Inside, warmth gathers around several fireplaces. Wooden benches line the walls. Straw mattresses fill a sleeping loft overhead. Travellers occupy nearly every available space. Merchants, pilgrims, a messenger carrying sealed letters, a widow journeying to relatives, a wandering craftsman who repairs locks and somehow manages to mention locks within every 3rd sentence. The atmosphere feels peaceful, yet beneath that peace lies familiar tension. You hear it immediately. Someone mentions wolves. Someone always mentions wolves. The conversation drifts toward recent sightings while travellers unpack cloaks and boots. One merchant claims a pack crossed the road ahead of his wagon. A pilgrim says wolves followed at a distance for nearly an hour. A farmer insists they have become bolder this winter. The lock repairer contributes an opinion involving wolves, doors, hinges, and 3 separate stories that somehow all end with broken locks. Nobody fully understands how. The dog settles beside the hearth and falls asleep. Clearly it has heard these stories before. You receive a bowl of pottage. Thick. Hot. Wonderful. The mixture contains barley, onions, peas, and enough mystery ingredients to keep conversation alive through supper. A chunk of coarse bread accompanies it. After a day on the road, the meal feels almost luxurious. Around the hall, travellers eat quietly. Outside, afternoon light fades. The season seems determined to keep daylight on a strict budget. Soon candles appear, beeswax for important places, tallow for ordinary ones. The scent mingles with wood smoke and cooking herbs. A novice passes carrying a lantern. Another gathers empty bowls. The rhythm feels practiced, ancient, comforting. As darkness settles, a small group gathers near the fire. Among them sits Brother Aldrich, the guest master. Unlike many storytellers you have met, Brother Aldrich prefers facts. Or at least he tries. Monks spend much of their lives collecting information. Harvest dates, weather records, births, deaths, property disputes, accounts, observations. Everything eventually becomes writing. If medieval Europe had a natural predator, it may have been the scribe. Nothing escaped documentation forever. Brother Aldrich sips watered ale and speaks thoughtfully. The wolves have not changed. Several listeners look surprised. One merchant raises an eyebrow. The wolves have not changed, the monk repeats. The winter has. That earns attention. He explains, several poor harvests have troubled nearby regions. Game animals grow scarcer. Some forests have been cut back. More roads cross old hunting grounds. Villages expand. Fields spread. Human beings steadily occupy spaces that once belonged entirely to wildlife. The wolves continue searching for food. The food simply happens to include areas closer to people than before. The explanation lacks drama, yet somehow it feels more unsettling than tales of giant beasts. A monster can be defeated. A hungry ecosystem is far more complicated. One pilgrim nods slowly. Another stares into the fire. The lock repairer attempts to connect this situation to hinges. No one allows him. Outside, wind brushes the walls. Inside, the fire crackles. Brother Aldrich rises briefly and returns carrying several manuscripts. The sight instantly commands attention. Books remain precious objects. Expensive. Rare. Powerful. Many travellers have never owned one. Some have never held one. The monk carefully opens a volume. Its pages glow pale in candlelight. Lines of neat handwriting march across the parchment. You lean closer. The abbey has recorded wolf sightings for decades. Perhaps generations. Brief entries fill the margins of ordinary records. Winter severe. 3 sheep lost. Tracks near eastern pasture. Pack seen crossing frozen river. Nothing sensational. Nothing theatrical. Just observations. Year after year. The accumulation feels strangely impressive. The wolf emerges not as a legend, but as a recurring neighbour. A dangerous neighbour. Yet still a neighbour. No one can quite agree whether this realization comforts or troubles the listeners. One woman asks whether wolves truly attack people. The room grows quiet. Brother Aldrich answers carefully. Sometimes. Rarely. Usually during hardship. Usually under unusual circumstances. Yet the possibility exists. And possibility often fuels fear more effectively than certainty. A shepherd seated nearby shares a story from childhood. His grandfather refused to travel alone after dusk. Not because he expected attack every night. Because he respected the chance. That distinction matters. The shepherd's grandfather apparently respected many things. Storms. Rivers. Falling trees. Bad ale. Wolves belonged on the same list. Prudent caution rather than constant terror. The conversation continues for hours. Old customs emerge. One traveller remembers hanging wolf claws above a stable. Another describes carrying juniper branches during winter journeys. A woman recalls her grandmother scattering blessed salt near sheep pens. Some swear these traditions worked. Others suspect the practices mainly reassured anxious farmers. Even now, it is hard to tell whether protection comes from magic, faith, preparation, or simple confidence. Perhaps medieval people rarely separated those things as neatly as modern minds prefer. The candles burn lower. One by one, travellers drift towards sleep. Boots are removed. Blankets unfolded. Prayers murmured. The hall grows quieter. Above, wind touches the roof. The dog finally abandons the hearth and chooses a place beside your mattress. An unmistakable declaration of friendship. Or ownership. Possibly both. You lie beneath wool blankets listening to distant sounds. The abbey bell marking the hour. A door closing somewhere in the complex. Soft snoring. The faint rustle of straw. Outside the walls, darkness covers fields and roads. Beyond those fields stand forests. Beyond the forests roam creatures that fill conversations across the countryside. Yet here within stone walls, sleep slowly settles over the guest house. Just before drifting off, you notice a final detail. Brother Aldrich remains awake, seated near a candle, writing, recording another day, another collection of stories, another winter evening shaped by wolves. His pen scratches softly across parchment. A tiny sound, easy to miss, yet somehow reassuring, because while fear wanders through the countryside beyond the abbey walls, someone is quietly preserving memory against the darkness. And eventually, with the bell marking another hour and the candle burning low, you surrender to uneasy sleep among travellers whose dreams are filled with roads, forests, and distant howls. Before dawn, the abbey bell wakes you with a slow iron voice rolling through the stones. For a moment you do not know where you are. The sleeping loft is dark, the straw beneath you prickly, the wool blanket tucked beneath your chin carrying the smell of smoke, sheep, and many travellers who have asked very little of laundry. Then memory returns. The town gate, the alehouse, the pilgrim road, Brother Aldrich writing by candlelight, the dog pressed against your side as if appointed by heaven to keep your ribs warm. Below, monks are already moving. Their sandals whisper across the floor. A novice coughs. Someone stirs the hearth embers until a red glow breathes beneath grey ash. The abbey is not awake all at once. It rises in pieces, bell by bell, footstep by footstep, prayer by prayer. You descend from the loft and pull on boots still stiff with yesterday's mud. A bowl of thin ale and coarse bread is handed to you near the door, along with a strip of smoked fish so salty it could preserve not only itself, but possibly your entire mood. You eat standing while the dog watches with grave spiritual interest. The guestmaster appears with his sleeves rolled and his ink stains darker in the dawn gloom. Brother Aldrich tells you the forest road eastward is passable, though he says the word passable the way a healer might say survivable. He advises keeping to the track, avoiding the marshy hollow, and not mistaking every sound for a wolf. Nor every wolf for a story, he adds. No one can quite agree whether that is comfort or warning. Soon you leave the abbey gate with 2 woodcutters, a charcoal burner, and a hunter named Oswin, who carries a bow wrapped in waxed cloth against the damp. The dog trots ahead, tail low, nose busy. Frost has silvered the fields overnight. Each clump of grass glitters faintly in the first blue light. Your breath drifts before you, and the cold settles into your fingers until they feel carved from turnip. The road turns toward the forest. At first the trees stand apart, bare branches lifted like dark hands. Then they close in, beech and oak giving way to pine, holly, thorn, and tangled hazel. The ground softens beneath old leaves. Water gathers in hoofprints. Somewhere unseen, a woodpecker strikes a trunk with the steady patience of a tiny carpenter who has never missed rent. Oswin pauses often, not nervously, carefully. He reads the path the way Brother Aldrich reads parchment, a bent reed, a scraped patch of bark, droppings near a stump, prints in wet soil. He shows you where deer passed before dawn, where boar rooted near the ditch, where fox crossed light-footed beneath a fallen branch. Then, near a narrow stream, he crouches. Wolf tracks. This time they are clear. Long-toed prints pressed into mud beside the water. The dog sniffs. then steps back and looks at everyone as if to say the matter has been professionally confirmed. Oswin studies the marks. 2, he says, maybe 3. The charcoal burner scratches his beard, or one wolf walking back to admire its own feet. This earns a quiet laugh, small and smoky in the cold air. The hunters and workers do not speak of wolves like alehouse men do. Their stories are plainer. They know wolves as creatures of habit, hunger, caution, and opportunity. A wolf follows deer trails. It keeps to cover. It tests boundaries. It learns where dogs are chained, where fences sag, where shepherd boys grow sleepy. Some swear wolves choose the weakest hour before dawn because that is when human courage is thinnest. Oswin says they choose it because livestock is quieter then, and men are usually asleep. Both ideas seem possible, though one is clearly less poetic and therefore less likely to be repeated in taverns. You follow the track deeper. The forest changes with every dozen steps. One moment the path is open and pale with frost. The next it passes beneath dense pine where darkness pools even after sunrise. Moss-softened stones, old leaves hold the smell of earth and rot. In hollows, mist lingers like breath that has forgotten to leave. The woodcutters know this place intimately. They point out a coppiced hazel stool cut years ago and now sprouting many slender poles. They show where bark has been stripped for tanning, where fallen branches can be gathered by right, where a boundary oak bears 3 old cuts marking the Lord's woodland from the abbeys. Such marks matter. In the Middle Ages, even trees can belong to someone, and woe to the hungry poor soul who learns this only after collecting the wrong bundle of sticks. The charcoal burner leads you past a smoking mound covered with turf and ash. Inside, wood smoulders slowly into charcoal. The mound must be watched day and night, fed air but not flame, like a sleeping dragon with practical uses. He says he has heard wolves at night many times. He does not fear the sound itself. He fears silence afterward, when his own thoughts begin improving the situation without permission. Even now, it's hard to tell whether the forest is truly quieter than the road, or whether you simply listen harder here. Near midday, you reach a clearing where several huts lean beneath the trees. Wood smoke crawls from their roofs. Split logs stand stacked in careful rows. A woman in a patched cloak stirs a pot over an outdoor fire, while 2 children carry kindling under her watchful eye. Around one hut hang strings of bones, bells, and little scraps of red cloth. The woman says the bells warn off foxes, wolves, and wandering spirits, though she admits they are mostly useful for knowing when goats have gone somewhere foolish. The goats, visible nearby, look fully capable of testing every bell. You sit beside the fire and warm your hands around a wooden bowl of broth. It tastes of onions, herbs, and smoke. The children stare at you, then at the dog, then at your boots, as if deciding which is most interesting. The dog wins. Oswin speaks with a woman about tracks near the stream. She nods and says wolves have been crossing there over weeks. They are lean this year, bold, perhaps, but not mad. She has lost no goats because her eldest boy sleeps in the byre loft with the animals when the nights are bitter, wrapped in a sheepskin, with a horn beside him to blow if anything comes near. The boy looks proud of this duty. You think of childhood in such a place learning saints' days, weather signs, the sound of owls, the price of salt, the proper way to scatter rushes, and which shadows at the tree line deserve attention. A medieval child does not need monsters invented. The world provides enough uncertainty already. After eating, you move on again. The road narrows into a forest track marked by broken branches and wheel ruts frozen hard. Oswin tells you of an old belief that wolves cannot turn their necks without turning their whole bodies, which is entirely untrue. but has survived because people enjoy facts that make dangerous animals seem slightly ridiculous. Another woodcutter claims a wolf's gaze can steal a person's voice if the wolf sees them first. To prevent this, some folk speak aloud before entering deep woods, greeting the trees, the saints, and anything listening. So you do, softly, a little awkwardly. The charcoal burner nods approval. A raven answers from above, which may or may not count as polite conversation. By afternoon the forest begins to thin. Pale light spills between trunks. Far beyond the branches, open fields appear, washed silver under the winter sun. Yet just before you leave the trees, the dog stops again. Everyone stops with it. In the soft earth beside the path lies a place where many paws have passed, overlapping prints pressed into mud and leaf mould. Not one wolf, not a tavern giant with lantern eyes. A pack moving quietly through its known road, using the same crossing perhaps for years. Oswin looks down for a long while. Then he touches 2 fingers to the track, stands, and says only, "They were here before dawn." The words settle gently, without drama. You step out from the trees into the open fields, and the sky seems wide enough to breathe again. Behind you, the forest remains still, holding its secrets beneath branches and frost. Ahead lies the manor road, low cottages, and a distant column of smoke rising where villagers gather. The dog shakes mud from its paws and trots on. You follow, carrying with you the smell of pine smoke, the memory of fresh tracks, and the quiet understanding that those who live closest to the forest fear the wolf least loudly, and know it most clearly. The manor road receives you with ruts, puddles, and the kind of sticky brown mud that seems personally determined to become part of your boots forever. Behind you, the forest slowly withdraws into a dark line of trunks and branches. Ahead, the land opens into fields divided by hedges, ditches, and low stone walls. Winter wheat lies in thin green strips. Crows pick through the furrows with the confidence of creatures who have never paid rent and never intend to. Smoke rises from cottages clustered near a small manor house, its timbered hall standing on a rise beside barns, byres, and a fenced yard where hens scratch with fussy importance. A bell rings from a little chapel near the lane. Not grand like the Abbey bell. This one sounds smaller, cracked perhaps, but faithful. The villagers are gathering. You follow Oswin, the woodcutters, the charcoal burner, and the dog toward the manor yard, where men and women stand beneath a grey sky with cloaks pulled tight and faces turned toward the hall door. A steward sits at a table under the shelter of an overhanging roof. Beside him rests a parchment roll, an inkhorn, and a face suggesting that compassion is welcome but must please wait until the accounts are finished. This is Manor Court Day. Disputes are heard. Fines are named. Rights are argued. Wrongs are remembered with impressive detail. A man complains that his neighbour's pig broke through a fence and rooted up turnips. The neighbour replies that the fence was poor, the pig was innocent, and the turnips were not especially promising anyway. This legal defence appears bold, if not wise. Then the talk turns to wolves. The mood changes at once. A shepherd steps forward, cap in hand. He's lost 2 ewes from the fold near the lower meadow. Another villager says a calf was found frightened and bloodied by the ditch, though it lived. A woman from the edge of the settlement says something has been circling the henhouse at night, and while hens are dramatic by nature, even they have seemed unusually distressed. The steward listens. The clerk writes. The lord himself is absent, which surprises no one. Lords have a remarkable talent for appearing at feasts and vanishing when fences require inspection. His reeve speaks in his place. a square man with a wool hood and an iron key hanging from his belt. He orders hedges repaired, dogs kept close, and children kept from gathering firewood alone near dusk. Sensible orders. Then he announces fines for any tenant whose neglected fence allows livestock to stray. This receives less enthusiasm. One farmer mutters that the wolf may eat the sheep, but the manor eats the farmer afterward. The comment travels through the crowd in a low ripple, carefully not reaching the reeve's ears, because medieval courage often knows exactly how far sound carries. No one can quite agree whether law brings order or simply arrives with a bill. You stand near the edge of the gathering, warming your hands beneath your cloak. The dog sits at your foot, watching a chicken with suspicious intensity. Nearby, an old woman sells little twisted cords dyed red, meant to be tied around lambs' necks for protection. She says the colour confuses wolves, evil spirits, and envious neighbours. It is a remarkably busy piece of string. Some swear such cords work best if knotted while reciting a saint's name. Others insist the knots must be tied in silence. A third person claims the charm fails if the lamb sneezes before sunrise. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, but the old woman sells 6 before the court is done. The complaints continue. A broken gate. Missing geese. A dog injured in the night. Tracks along the mill stream. The reeve announces that able men will help strengthen the outer folds before nightfall. Oswin is asked to examine the tracks. The woodcutters are told to bring thorn branches from the common hedge. The charcoal burner is asked whether he has seen signs in the forest. He answers honestly, which is to say briefly and without improving the tale enough to satisfy anyone. As the crowd disperses, you move with the villagers toward the lower meadow. Work begins. It is plain, cold, muddy work, the kind that forms the true skeleton of medieval survival. Men drive stakes into wet ground. Women carry bundles of thorn. Older children gather stones to block gaps beneath rails. Someone brings a mallet with a cracked handle. Someone else brings a better mallet and receives instant popularity. You help drag thorn branches into place along a weak stretch of fencing. The thorns catch at your sleeves and scratch your hands. The dog wisely supervises from a safe distance, having apparently chosen a management role. By the fold. The smell of sheep rises warm and oily into the cold air. The animals press together, chewing calmly, entirely unaware of legal proceedings conducted on their behalf. Their wool is thick with burrs and bits of straw. A shepherd boy sprinkles a line of ash near the gate because his grandmother taught him that predators dislike crossing hearth ash. Oswin watches this and says nothing. Perhaps he doubts it. Perhaps he respects grandmothers. Perhaps both. The manor priest arrives carrying a small vessel of holy water and a face of solemn duty. He blesses the fold, the animals, the workers, and, after a pause, the dog. The dog accepts with moderate dignity. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the blessing changes the danger outside the fence, but it changes the people inside it. Shoulders lower, breathing eases, work resumes with steadier hands. As afternoon fades, clouds thicken over the fields. The repaired fence stands rough but stronger. Thorn bristles along the outer side. A watch platform, little more than boards fixed between posts, is checked and declared unlikely to collapse unless someone becomes overconfident. Back near the manor yard, villagers share bread, cheese, and onions. A pot of pottage steams beside the bakehouse wall. You sit on an overturned basket and eat from a wooden bowl while the dog receives scraps from 3 different sources and pretends each one is a surprise. The reeve speaks of organising a watch at the winter storehouses. Grain must be protected. Hay must be guarded. Livestock must be brought closer to the settlement. Hunger, everyone knows, does not stop at the edge of a forest. It follows scent, opportunity, weakness. The old woman with the red cord sits nearby and tells you that wolves once served certain saints in old stories, guiding lost children or punishing wicked men. Then she shrugs and says real wolves mostly punish careless shepherds. It is a practical theology. Dusk lowers itself over the manor. The chapel bell rings again, cracked and gentle. People begin drifting homeward, carrying tools, empty baskets, and the day's judgments. The steward rolls up his parchment, the clerk wipes his pen. The repaired fold darkens against the pale field. You look back toward the forest, now a black seam beneath the evening sky. Somewhere there, prints cross mud. Somewhere there, hunger moves without malice. And here, among fences, charms, fines, ash lines, prayers, and thorn branches, human beings answer as they always do imperfectly, stubbornly, together. The reeve points toward the barns and winter storehouse, where lanterns are already being lit. Tonight, he says, there will be a watch. You rise, pull your cloak close, and follow the others toward the warm smell of hay, grain, animals, and another long night of listening. The last of the daylight fades behind the fields, and the manor settles into that peculiar winter twilight when the world seems undecided whether it belongs to evening or night. Lanterns appear one by one. A glow in the stable yard, a glow near the bakehouse, another beside the winter storehouse where sacks of grain stand stacked like sleeping giants beneath heavy beams. You follow the reeve and several villagers toward the barns. The dog comes too, naturally. By now nobody questions its presence. The animal has quietly become part of the landscape, like the chapel bell or the muddy lane. The watch begins with practical matters. Extra hay is carried into the byres. Doors are checked. Latches tested. Loose boards hammered back into place. No heroic speeches are given. No dramatic vows are made. Most medieval preparations involve a surprising amount of carrying things from one place to another. The storehouse itself smells wonderful. Not because grain is particularly fragrant, but because it represents security. Bread not yet baked. Pottage not yet cooked. Winter survived one meal at a time. The thick oak walls hold back the wind. Iron hinges gleam in lantern light. A heavy lock secures the main door. The wandering lock repairer from the Abbey guest house would probably be delighted. You imagine him emerging from a haystack merely to compliment the craftsmanship. The thought makes you smile. Nearby, sheep occupy a temporary fold built closer to the settlement than usual. Their soft noises drift through the darkness. Cattle stand in the byre, occasionally shifting their weight with deep, sleepy sighs. The villagers understand something important. When winter grows harsh, predators grow practical. And so do people. Animals that might spend warmer seasons scattered across distant pastures are drawn inward now, gathered near barns, walls, and human company. The result is a strange closeness. Humans protecting livestock. Livestock attracting wolves. Wolves reminding humans why they built communities in the first place. The reeve assigns positions. Not military positions. More like sensible places to stand while trying not to freeze. 2 shepherds near the lower fold. Several farmhands by the barns. Oswin watches the lane leading toward the forest. You find a place beside a stack of firewood near the storehouse wall. The dog settles beside you. A brazier burns nearby, filling the air with a smell of charcoal. Above, stars gradually emerge between drifting clouds. The night becomes still, very still. The sort of stillness that encourages listening. Far away an owl calls. Someone coughs. A horse stamps in its stall. The wind brushes bare branches. And between those sounds stretches silence. Long pieces of silence. Enough silence for thoughts to wander. Enough silence for imagination to become energetic. Some swear wolves prefer such nights. Clear. Cold. Quiet. Others claim weather matters far less than hunger. Those who tell the tale never fully agree. One elderly shepherd shares bread with you while discussing past winters. He remembers years when snow stood waist-deep against cottage walls. Years when rivers froze hard enough for wagons to cross. Years when wolves ventured astonishingly close to villages. Not because they wanted trouble, he says. Because they wanted supper. The distinction seems important to him. You notice that many people closest to the problem speak this way. Less fear. More understanding. Not affection. Certainly not affection. But understanding. The wolf remains dangerous. Yet it remains an animal. Not a demon. Not a curse. Not a creature plotting medieval mischief from a secret underground headquarters. Simply a hunter trying to survive. The shepherd removes a small pouch from his belt. Inside are dried herbs. Juniper. Yarrow. A few sprigs of something you cannot identify. My wife insists I carry these. For protection. For marriage. You laugh. So they work. Perfectly. His eyes twinkle. A second later he adds that the herbs are also supposed to discourage bad luck. Again, medieval remedies often embrace efficiency. Why solve one problem when you can attempt to solve 5? The hours pass slowly. People rotate positions. More wood is added to the brazier. A young farmhand nearly falls asleep standing upright and is immediately handed a bucket of cold water for washing his face. The method proves effective. Not pleasant, but effective. Near midnight, clouds drift aside completely. Moonlight spills across the fields. Frost gleams silver on fences and roofs. The landscape transforms. Beautiful. Quiet. Almost unreal. Even the dog seems more alert. Its ears lift. Its head turns toward the distant tree line. Several others notice. Conversation stops. Everyone listens. For a few moments nothing happens. Then comes a sound. Not loud. Not dramatic. A distant howl. Long. Thin. Carried across frozen ground. The note drifts through the darkness before fading away. No one panics. No one shouts. Yet every person hears it. Every person understands it. Another howl answers from farther away. Then silence returns. The shepherd beside you nods slowly. 2. Oswin, listening from the lane, raises 3 fingers. Apparently expert opinions differ. The dog remains focused on the darkness. A horse shifts uneasily in the stable. Several sheep bunch together within their fold. The effect is subtle, yet noticeable. Animals often react before humans fully process what they have heard. The reeve walks the perimeter carrying a lantern. Its glow moves steadily across the yard. Order. Routine. Presence. Simple things, yet comforting. You think of Brother Aldrich's records. Year after year. Winter after winter. Similar nights. Similar worries. Similar sounds carried over frozen fields. Perhaps this has happened countless times before. Perhaps it will happen countless times again. A strange calm comes with that realization. The danger feels real, yet also ancient. Part of a cycle older than anyone currently standing watch. Near the edge of the yard stands a small wayside cross. Someone has tied ribbons to it. Someone else has tucked sprigs of evergreen beneath the base. The moonlight catches the pale wood. The sight feels reassuring. not because it guarantees safety, because it represents continuity. People have always answered uncertainty with symbols, prayers, stories, customs, community, whatever helps transform fear into something manageable. The night deepens. The cold becomes sharper. Breath hangs thick in the air. Frost gathers on cloaks and beards. One shepherd begins quietly singing. Not loudly, just enough to stay awake. The tune drifts through the darkness. Soon another joins. Then another. Simple voices beneath winter stars. Nothing grand. Nothing polished. Yet somehow the sound makes the night feel less empty. Even the dog appears to approve. Or perhaps it simply enjoys sitting near people who occasionally drop food. Its motivations remain difficult to determine. Hours later, as the darkest part of night approaches, Oswin returns from a circuit near the outer fence. He reports tracks. Fresh tracks. Not within the settlement. Not near the barns, but beyond the lower meadow, moving parallel to the fields. Watching, passing through, the news spreads quietly. Nobody seems surprised. The wolves know the livestock is here. The villagers know the wolves know, and so the watch continues. Patient, steady, human. At last, far in the east, a faint pale glow appears along the horizon. Dawn. Not yet sunlight. Only the promise of sunlight. The longest hours have passed. The stars begin fading. Roosters prepare their daily announcement that they personally invented morning. The villagers relax slightly. Night is losing ground. The sheep remain safe. The cattle remain calm. The grain remains secure. The watch has done its work. You stand and stretch stiff limbs. The dog rises beside you. Beyond the meadow, beyond frost-covered hedges, beyond the fading shadows, lies the forest where the tracks continue. And somewhere out there, moving through dawn's grey light, hunger still walks its ancient paths. Dawn comes thin and cold over the manor fields, turning every hedge silver and every puddle into a small, cracked mirror. You walk with Oswen and 3 hunters beneath bare branches, following the fresh tracks beyond the lower meadow. The dog trots close to your heel now, its earlier confidence softened by the serious mood of the morning. Frost stiffens the grass. Your boots break the white crust with soft, brittle sounds. Behind you, the manor smoke rises pale and straight, while the chapel bell gives one small, cracked note to mark the waking hour. The hunters do not hurry. That is the first thing you notice. Tavern stories make hunts sound like shouting, galloping, horns, and dramatic men with excellent hats. Real tracking begins mostly with silence, bent backs, cold fingers, and someone saying, "No, not there," beside the ditch. Oswin crouches near the prince. The wolves have moved along the hedge, not toward the barns, but parallel to them, watching the safer ground from beyond human reach. The tracks pass through a gap in the thorn, over a frozen rut, and toward a stand of ash trees. One hunter, a narrow man named Perrin, touches the earth and says the pack did not linger. "Hungry," he murmurs. Another hunter answers, "Everything is hungry." No one laughs, because it is true. You carry a bundle of snares and a small sack of bread and cheese. Oswin carries his bow, Perrin carries a spear, and the oldest hunter, Malay, carries a horn at his belt and a pouch of dried herbs said to clear the eyes and sharpen judgment. He chews the herbs as he walks, making a face that suggests wisdom often tastes like old broom. Some swear hunters should carry mugwort against wolf bewitchment. Others say a sprig of ash in the cap keeps one from losing the path. Malay says both customs are useful if they persuade a fool to pay attention. No one can quite agree whether that makes the charm magical or simply practical, and perhaps the difference matters less in the cold. The path leads towards scrub woodland where rabbits leave nervous trails among roots. Here the hunters set small snares, not for wolves, but for the lesser creatures that keep a pot filled. Medieval hunting is not always noble sport. Often it is supper trying to become available. A rabbit in winter can mean broth, fur lining for a mitten, and one evening when hunger sits a little farther from the door, Oswin shows you how the wolf tracks differ from dog tracks longer stride, cleaner purpose, prints set almost in a line. A dog wanders, he says. A wolf means it. The dog looks mildly insulted. Perrin notices and says, "No offence, Master Dog." The dog accepts this apology by ignoring him completely. You move through a belt of trees where the morning light enters in long grey ribbons. Somewhere overhead, crows complain about matters known only to crows. The hunters pause at broken twigs, disturbed snow, tufts of wool caught on bramble. The world becomes readable when you know its letters. A bent blade of grass tells of passage. A smear on bark tells height. A place where birds have fallen silent tells caution, or weather, or nothing at all. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the forest reveals secrets or whether people simply grow better at asking. By mid-morning, the hunters find where the wolves rested. A shallow hollow beneath tangled roots holds pressed leaves and a few pale hairs. Not a lair, Oswin says, only a stopping place. The pack moved before sunrise, likely toward the ridge where deer sometimes shelter from the wind. Malich stands with his hands on his hip, staring east. Not monsters, he says quietly, but they can make a widow of a flock. It is a strange phrase and a true one. You think of the shepherds mending fences, the old woman selling red cords, the monk writing in candlelight. The wolf touches every part of this world because every part of this world is tied together. Wool, meat, leather, candles, rent, taxes, tolls, feast days, fast days, and the thin sleep of those who listen after midnight. Near a frozen stream, the hunters argue softly about an old belief. Perrin claims a wolf loses its boldness if it sees its own reflection in water by moonlight. Oswin says this is nonsense. Mallet says nonsense has survived longer than many kings, so perhaps it deserves courtesy. They all agree not to test the matter personally. You rest beside the stream and eat coarse bread with hard cheese. The cheese resists your teeth like a small legal dispute. Water slips beneath ice with a faint glassy whisper. The dog receives a crust and sits upon it for several moments before deciding whether to eat it, bury it, or regard it as treasure. The morning lengthens. Tracks grow harder to follow across stony ground. The hunters spread out, then gather again near a fallen oak. Here the snow shows marks of deer, fox, hare, and wolf layered over one another like writing on scraped parchment. Oswin studies them for a long while. They passed before dawn, he says, but they are not close now. A slight easing passes through the group. Not relief exactly, more like the body remembering to breathe. Still, the hunter set markers along the route, bent twigs, small notches, a strip of cloth tied where a trail crosses open ground. The Lord's men may come later, or they may not. Hunts require time, dogs, beaters, permission, weather, and a nobleman willing to leave a warm hall. This final requirement is notoriously unreliable. By afternoon, you begin circling back toward the manor. The sun remains pale, giving light without warmth, like a candle behind horn. Your feet ache. Your cloak smells of frost, pine, and smoke. A thorn has scratched your wrist, and your fingers sting where cold has found the seams of your gloves. Mallet tells a final story as you walk. Long ago, he says, a hunter tried to shame a wolf by calling it coward. The wolf, being sensible, did not answer. Later it took 3 sheep from the man's fold while he was boasting in the alehouse. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the story proves wolves are clever or men are foolish, though both conclusions seem generously supported. The dog suddenly stops at the edge of the trees. Ahead, open fields spread toward the manor, smoke rising from cottages, the chapel bell waiting in its little tower. Behind you, the forest keeps its many paths hidden under frost and leaves. Oswin looks back once. We know where they move now, he says. It is not victory, but it is knowledge. And knowledge, in a winter like this, is a kind of lantern. You return toward the village as the light lowers, carrying no trophy, no grand tale, no proof of a monstrous beast with eyes like hellfire. Only tracks, habits, hunger, and the quiet skill of people who have learned to read danger before it reaches the door. By the time you reach the manor yard, the storehouse watch is already being arranged for another night. The sheep are gathered close. The repaired fence stands thorny and dark against the frost. The old shepherd lifts a hand in greeting, and the dog runs ahead to accept praise it has only partly earned. The chapel bell rings. 1 note, then another, and as evening begins gathering again over the fields, you understand that the hunt has not ended anything. It has only drawn the shape of the fear more clearly, there in the mud, beneath the bare winter branches. The chapel bell finishes its evening toll, and the sound drifts away across the frost-covered fields like a thread disappearing into twilight. You spend the remainder of the afternoon helping carry bundles of thorn branches toward the sheepfold. The work is simple enough. Lift, drag, stack, repeat. Medieval life often rewards persistence more than brilliance. By the time darkness begins gathering beneath the hedgerows, your shoulders ache pleasantly, and your boots have acquired an entirely new layer of mud. The dog, meanwhile, contributes by supervising from a comfortable patch of straw. Its leadership style remains controversial. As evening settles over the manor, people begin moving toward the chapel. Not everyone, not always, but enough. The small stone building stands beside a cluster of bare yew trees, whose dark branches seem untouched by winter. A few candles glow inside the narrow windows. Their light flickers softly against the dusk. You follow the villagers through the door. The air smells of beeswax, damp wool, and old stone. A handful of benches fill the room. Near the altar hangs a painted image of a saint whose colours have faded beneath generations of smoke. Someone has left dried flowers there. Someone else has left a tiny carved sheep. And someone, rather surprisingly, has left a wolf tooth tied to a red cord. The priest notices you looking. Protection, he says. The answer seems increasingly popular. Tonight the chapel serves a purpose beyond prayer. People have come seeking reassurance. That much becomes obvious. The wolves remain outside. The winter remains hard. No miracle has occurred. Yet gathering together feels useful. Human, necessary. The priest begins with prayers. Simple words, familiar words, the sort repeated countless times across villages, monasteries, castles, and roadside shrines throughout medieval Europe. As voices join together, the chapel grows warmer. Not physically, emotionally, like a fire built from shared attention. When prayers end, people linger. And where medieval people linger, stories follow. Soon the conversation turns toward charms, relics, herbs, protective customs. everything that might help keep darkness comfortably outside the door. A shepherd's wife produces a small pouch sewn from green cloth. Inside rests a pilgrim badge touched to a saint's shrine many years earlier. She believes it protects her flock. A farmer carries a silver coin drilled with a hole and worn around his neck. His grandmother insisted it guarded against misfortune. An elderly man claims a wolf tooth nailed above a stable door prevents attacks. Another man immediately replies that his cousin tried exactly that and lost 3 sheep anyway. No one can quite agree whether the tooth failed or the cousin simply owned exceptionally careless sheep. The discussion remains unresolved. A woman seated near the front describes an old custom from her childhood. During difficult winters, villagers would place candles in windows facing the forest. The lights served several purposes. They honoured saints, comforted travellers, and, according to local tradition, discouraged wandering spirits. Whether wolves cared about candlelight remains unclear, but frightened people certainly did. The priest listens patiently. Unlike Brother Aldrich, who prefers records and observation, this priest seems comfortable allowing belief and practicality to sit together on the same bench. Perhaps village life requires that. After all, certainty is a luxury rarely available in difficult seasons. A young mother asks whether wolves truly fear church bells. Several older villagers immediately offer opinions. Some swear they do. Others insist wolves ignore bells completely. One man claims a pack once howled during an entire feast day service. The priest smiles. I suspect wolves concern themselves more with hunger than theology. Laughter spreads gently through the chapel. Even the young mother smiles. Yet nobody seems offended. The answer feels reasonable. Outside, darkness deepens. Wind brushes the chapel walls. Candles flicker. The atmosphere grows increasingly intimate. Stories become quieter, more personal. A shepherd recalls sleeping beside sheep during a particularly harsh winter decades ago. A widow remembers hearing wolves beyond her cottage when she was a child. A farm labourer admits he still dislikes crossing open fields alone after sunset. The confession earns nods rather than mockery. Fear shared becomes lighter somehow. You notice the old woman who sold red protective cords earlier. She sits near the rear bench, twisting another length of dyed thread between her fingers. Children gather around her. Soon she begins telling a story. Not a frightening story. A curious one. According to local legend, wolves once guided a lost pilgrim through a blizzard towards safety. Some swear it happened. Others insist the tale grew from misunderstanding. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, yet the children listen with wide eyes. The old woman continues. In her version, the wolves never spoke, never became magical, never transformed into anything else. They simply walked ahead through the snow. The pilgrim followed. The wolves disappeared. The abbey appeared. The end. The simplicity somehow makes the story stronger. The dog, lying near the door, appears unimpressed, possibly because no bread is involved. Eventually people begin leaving. Candles are extinguished one by one. The priest offers blessings. Cloaks are gathered. Doors open. Cold air enters. You step outside into a clear winter night. Stars cover the sky. The village lies quiet beneath them. Lanterns glow warmly in cottage windows. Smoke rises from chimneys. The sheep remain secure behind their reinforced fences. For now, the old woman pauses beside you before heading home. She holds up one of her red cords. Take it. You accept. The thread feels surprisingly warm. Does it work, you ask? She smiles. What does... The cord? Protection. Luck. Anything. The old woman considers carefully. Then she shrugs. It reminds people to pay attention. With that, she continues down the lane. You watch her disappear into darkness. Her answer lingers. Perhaps many medieval charms work exactly that way. Not through magic, through mindfulness. A knot tied around a wrist reminds someone to stay alert. A blessed token encourages caution. A ritual prompts preparation. Faith and practicality intertwine until separating them becomes nearly impossible. Back near the barns, villagers prepare for another night watch. Lanterns swing gently. The reeve checks the fences once more. Oswin studies the distant tree line. The dog finally decides to resume active employment and accompanies you toward the outer fold. The red cord rests in your pocket. The chapel stories remain fresh in your mind. Beyond the settlement, the fields stretch pale beneath moonlight. Beyond the fields lies the forest. And beyond certainty, somewhere between fact and folklore, between tracks in mud and prayers whispered over candles, the wolves continue their ancient wandering through the winter countryside. Tonight, however, another kind of protection stands watch as well. Community, memory, custom, the steady glow of chapel candles, the sound of familiar voices, and the stubborn determination of ordinary people refusing to surrender either their livestock or their peace of mind. Morning arrives with the clatter of wheels, the lowing of cattle, and the steady complaint of people who have woken before sunrise and would like everyone to know it. You leave the manor as frost loosens from the hedges and return toward the town road with Oswin, 2 traders, and the dog, who now trots as if officially appointed to inspect all commerce in the region. The red cord from the old woman rests in your pocket. It is only thread, dyed wool twisted by careful fingers, yet you find yourself touching it whenever the road bends near trees. By mid-morning the town comes into view. Its walls rise damp and grey above the river mist. Smoke lifts from chimneys. The gate stands open, and a queue has already formed beneath it carts of turnips, cages of hens, bundles of wool, sacks of grain, barrels of ale, and one goat that appears personally offended by the concept of civilization. The market toll collector sits beside the gate with a tablet, a purse, and the calm expression of a man who can turn inconvenience into income. Everyone pays, everyone complains. This, too, is a medieval custom of great durability. Inside the walls, the square has transformed since your rainy evening at the alehouse. Stalls line the open space beneath patched awnings. Merchants shout prices. Butchers hang salted meat. Fishwives lay out river fish on boards. Tanners display stiff hides. A potter arranges bowls by size and looks deeply suspicious of children with elbows. The air is rich with smells, smoke, mud, wet wool, onions, cheese, leather, fish, horse dung, and hot bread. Somewhere a baker pulls loaves from an oven, and for one bright moment nearly everyone forgives the world. Yet beneath all the market noise, unease moves quietly. You hear it at the wool stall first. A shepherd argues with a cloth merchant over the price of fleeces. Fewer lambs this season, more lost to cold, more lost to wolves. The merchant says poor wool cannot become fine cloth by being pitied. The shepherd says fine cloth cannot be woven from animals that have vanished into the forest. No one can quite agree whether the wolf has raised prices or merely given everyone a better excuse. Nearby the tanner speak of pelts. A wolfskin, properly cured, can bring coin, especially if a lord promises bounty. But the tanners also need sheep hides, calf skins, and goat leather. Every animal lost before market is one less hide, one less trade, one less pair of shoes, one less belt, one less patched harness. The wolf leaves no written account, pays no toll, owes no rent, and still manages to interfere with the economy quite effectively. At the butcher's stall, customers press close. Meat is dearer. Everyone knows why, or thinks they do. A woman mutters that wolves are taking animals before Christians can salt them properly. The butcher replies that he would happily negotiate with the wolves if they learned weights and measures. His assistant suggests charging them stall fees. This produces a tired laugh, the sort people give when the joke is almost too true. The dog sits beside the stall, hoping to become part of a separate charitable economy. It succeeds once, possibly twice. You move through the square while market bells mark the hour. A clerk from the manor reads notices near the cross. A bounty has been offered for wolf heads taken near the Lord's woods. Men gather to listen. Some look eager, others look doubtful. Hunting sounds profitable until one remembers the wolf has teeth. Winter has mud, and noble promises sometimes travel faster than noble payments. Some swear bounties clear the forest quickly. Others say they encourage men to bring in any unfortunate large dog and argue confidently. Those who tell the tale never fully agree. A merchant from the northern road tells of a village where wolves came so often that people moved their market day closer to noon, so no one had to travel in the dark. Another says inns have begun charging more for stable space near the centre of yards, away from outer fences. A third complains that guards now demand extra coin to escort pack animals through wooded stretches. Fear has become a cost, a measure, a weight laid quietly on every sack. You pause at a stall selling small household things, iron nails, wooden spoons, pins, horn combs, bundles of herbs, wax tablets, and little charms stitched into linen. The woman tending it recognizes the red cord in your pocket before you take it out. Good dye, she says. Good protection. She shrugs. Good reminder. The same answer again, nearly. She shows you a charm made of rowan wood and iron filings wrapped in cloth. It is said to keep wolves, fever, and ill wishes away from a threshold. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the charm protects homes or simply gives frightened hands something to tie above the door. Either way, she sells many. Across the square, pilgrims bargain for bread before continuing toward the abbey. One carries a badge from a distant shrine. Another has sewn tiny bells to his staff, perhaps for spirits, perhaps for dogs, perhaps because people have always enjoyed sounding more important while walking. Near the stone cross, Brother Aldrich appears, his ink-stained hands folded into his sleeves. He speaks with merchants, asks questions, listens carefully. You see him noting details on a wax tablet: prices, sightings, losses, weather, road conditions. The wolves are becoming lines in an account, entries in memory, marks on soft wax to be copied later beside harvest notes and feast days. He sees you and nods. The market tells much, he says. You look around at wool, hides, meat, charms, tolls, rumours, and anxious faces. It talks loudly. Markets usually do. A bell rings again. The sound ripples through the square. For a moment, you remember the first evening inside these walls rain on the gatehouse roof, warm bread from the monk's basket, the first distant howl fading beyond the town. Now the fear has changed shape. It is no longer only a sound in the dark. It has become a higher price for mutton, an empty place in a flock, a new latch on a stable door, a charm tied to a child's sleeve. Toward afternoon, clouds gather and market folk begin packing their goods. Unsold cabbages go back into carts. Hens are covered. Cloth is rolled. Coin is counted twice and trusted once. The goat from morning breaks loose briefly, causing more panic than any wolf has managed within the walls. then is recaptured with great drama and very little dignity. As the square empties, the dog trots beside you toward the town gate. Outside lies the road again. Inside, the alehouse glows faintly, waiting for evening stories. You look back once at the market cross, at the damp stalls, at the people carrying home bread, salt, gossip, and worry. One feared animal has brushed against every trade here, every purse, every supper pot. The town endures it as towns endure most things by counting, selling, mending, praying, laughing softly, and closing the gate before dark. Beyond the wall, the fields wait under a low winter sky, and somewhere past the hedges, unseen but never absent, the wolves continue moving through the spaces between hunger and human need. The town gate closes behind you with a deep wooden thud, and the sound feels less like an ending than a lid placed gently over the day. You stand outside the walls now, just beyond the last comfort of torchlight, where the road bends along the palisade and the fields begin to lose their shapes in the falling dark. The market noise fades behind stone and timber. No more shouting over cabbages. No more bargaining over wool. No goat declaring war on civilization. Only the soft creak of the gate bar sliding into place, the hiss of wind through dead grass, and the dog breathing at your side. The watchmen have asked for extra eyes tonight. Or rather, they have accepted extra eyes, since medieval towns rarely refuse unpaid help when wolves, weather, or suspicious strangers are involved. You follow two guards along the outer path beside the palisade, where sharpened stakes lean outward above a ditch half filled with old leaves and black water. The town wall rises to your left, open country spreads to your right. The last light drains from the sky, leaving hedges, fields, and distant trees flattened into shadow. One guard carries a lantern. The other carries a spear and a small pouch of blessed salt tied to his belt. He says his wife put it there. He says this in the tone of a man who respects both his wife and salt. Some swear salt laid across a threshold confuses evil things. Others say wolves remain famously uninterested in theology, charms, and household seasoning. No one can quite agree whether the pouch protects the guard, reassures his wife, or merely improves him in case he's later turned into soup. The dog sniffs the ditch and sneezes. This seems like a fair review. You reach a small watch shelter built against the palisade, no more than a lean-to of planks with a roof of thatch and a brazier glowing beneath it. Two more townsmen wait there, wrapped in cloaks. One is a butcher's assistant from the market, the other is a bell ringer from the chapel, thin as a rake and twice as solemn. They make room for you near the brazier. Heat touches your palms. Smoke climbs into the night. The town behind you settles into its evening rhythm. Doors shut, shutters latch. Somewhere inside, a mother calls a child away from a window. Somewhere a pot is taken from the fire. Somewhere rushes are swept over a floor, and a candle is pinched out between damp fingers. Outside, every sound grows larger. A branch scrapes a fence post and becomes, for one heartbeat, claws. A hare bolts through dry grass and becomes a pale beast. A crow shifts in a tree and becomes someone whispering. Darkness does not create danger. Exactly. It gives ordinary things too much imagination. The bell ringer says this is why he prefers bells. A bell tells the hour plainly. It does not scurry, rustle, or pretend to be three different creatures at once. The butcher's assistant says bells are also useful because, unlike geese, they do not chase apprentices. Apparently this is based on personal experience. You sit with them as the moon rises behind thin clouds. Frost begins to gather on the outer rails of the palisade. Beyond the ditch, the fields slope down toward the river meadows. Farther still, The forest lies in a low black band. You cannot see wolves. You cannot see much of anything. Yet the knowledge of them alters the landscape. Every hedge becomes a possible hiding place. Every hollow becomes a path. Every patch of darkness seems to be waiting for a name. Even now, it is hard to tell whether you are listening to the world or to the stories the world has placed inside you. The guards speak quietly of earlier years. One remembers a winter when wolves came close enough to worry the swineherds. Another tells of a night when the town dogs barked until dawn and no one found a single track the next morning. The butcher's assistant claims his uncle once frightened off a wolf by throwing a shoe at it, though those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the animal fled from fear, confusion, or insult. You warm your hands and think of Brother Aldrich's records, the manor court, the market stalls, the old woman's red cords. The same fear keeps changing garments. On the road it was rumour, in the abbey it was ink, at the manor it was law and fence work, in the chapel it was prayer, at the market it was price. Here, beyond the palisade, it becomes sound. The night deepens. A wind moves over the fields and passes through the thorn hedge with a dry, whispering rattle. The dog lifts its head. One guard raises a hand, and conversation stops at once. You listen. At first there is nothing. Then a faint yip far off near the river hollow. Another sound answers from the direction of the forest. Not near. Not yet. But clear enough. The dog stands, body still, ears pricked forward. The guard with the spear steps beyond the lean-to and peers into the dark. The lantern throws a small, trembling circle of light that reaches almost nowhere. It shows the ditch, the palisade stakes, the wet grass, and then gives up. Another howl comes, longer this time, low at first, then rising, then thinning until it seems woven into the cold itself. No one speaks. The town behind the wall remains quiet, though you know people inside have heard it. Dogs bark suddenly from several yards. A baby cries. A shutter closes with a sharp clap. The bell ringer crosses himself. The butcher's assistant pretends not to. You feel the sound in your chest more than in your ears. It is not evil. That is almost the trouble. It is wild and hungry and old, belonging to a world that does not ask permission from walls, markets, courts, or candles. After a while, the howling stops. The silence afterward is worse for a few breaths, then slowly becomes ordinary silence again. The guard lowers his spear. Across the meadow, he says. The other nods. Not coming in. Not coming in. 3 small words and the whole shelter breathes again. The brazier has fed another piece of charcoal. Someone shares hard bread. The dog receives a crust and chews it with such grave concentration that everyone feels slightly steadier. You drink thin ale from a shared cup, the rim cold against your lips. Hours pass. The watch continues. From time to time, the guards walk the palisade line, checking stakes and listening beside the ditch. Once, near midnight, something moves near the hedgerow, and all 4 of you hold still until a deer steps into moonlight, delicate and nervous, before vanishing again. The butcher's assistant exhales and mutters that deer should wear bells if they insist on behaving like roomers. The moon slips between clouds. Frost whitens the field. The town becomes a dark shape with a few glowing windows tucked inside it like embers in ash. You begin to understand how medieval nights stretch so long in memory. Without bright lamps, without constant noise, the hours do not rush. They pool, they deepen, they ask you to sit with every creak, every breath, every thought. Near the darkest part of night, the distant howling comes once more. Farther away now, moving along the river. The sound rises, trembles and fades. No panic follows, only the old, patient recognition of creatures sharing the same winter in very different ways. At last, a faint paling touches the eastern sky. The stars dim one by one. The guard with the salt pouch yawns so widely his jaw cracks. The bell ringer stands and prepares to return inside, where his morning bell must tell the town what everyone's bones already know. Dawn is coming. The palisade, the ditch, the hedges, the fields all return slowly from shadow into shape. No wolf appears, no attack comes. Yet the night has shown you something truer than spectacle. It has shown how darkness changes the world without moving a single stone. You step back through the postern gate as the first bell rings. The dog follows, tired but pleased. Behind you, beyond the palisade, the meadow lies pale and empty. And somewhere beyond it, the wolves go on beneath the fading stars. The morning bell is still echoing over the rooftops when word begins spreading through the town. Not shouted, not announced, carried. A baker tells a customer tells a carter, the carter tells a stable boy, the stable boy tells everyone he meets and improves the details slightly along the way. The Lord's hunt is gathering. You hear it first near the market cross, where townsfolk stand beneath a pale winter sky rubbing warmth into their hands and exchanging news with the seriousness usually reserved for harvest forecasts and approaching storms. A bounty has already been offered. Tracks have been found. Livestock losses continue. And now the Lord has decided action must be seen. That final detail matters. Medieval authority often benefits from appearing active. Whether it achieves anything is a separate question. By mid-morning, the roads round the town grow busy. Men arrive carrying spears. Others bring bows. Dogs bark from carts and wagons. Several hunters from nearby villages appear wearing patched cloaks, an expression suggesting they trust wolves more than noble planning. You leave the town with the gathering crowd and follow the road toward a broad stretch of woodland several miles away. The dog accompanies you, naturally. At this point, it would probably accompany a royal coronation, a monastery fire, or the end of the world if sufficient food seemed likely. The weather remains cold but clear. Frost lingers beneath hedges. Thin clouds drift across a pale blue sky. Ahead, the forest waits. Dark, silent, patient. The hunting party grows larger as you approach. There are noble retainers wearing better boots than most villagers. There are foresters who know every stream and hollow. There are shepherds eager to protect their flocks. There are farmers hoping fewer wolves might mean fewer worries. And there are several men who simply enjoy being included in events involving dogs, horns, and opportunities to stand importantly in fields. One of them appears to have brought a hunting horn larger than practical necessity demands. No one comments. Medieval people, like modern people, occasionally enjoy dramatic accessories. Near the forest edge stands the Lord himself, or at least stands briefly. He is wrapped in expensive fur. His horse is magnificent. His gloves probably cost more than some cottages. Several attendants surround him. The contrast between noble elegance and muddy reality is striking. One shepherd quietly observes that wolves never seem impressed by expensive gloves. The remark earns a few hidden smiles. The hunt begins with preparation. Dogs are organized. Beaters receive instructions. Hunters discuss routes. Foresters point out likely crossings. The process takes much longer than heroic stories usually mention. Real hunting contains an astonishing amount of standing around while people argue about where everyone else should stand. Eventually the lines form. Beaters spread through sections of woodland. Hunters take positions along likely escape routes. Dogs strain against leads. The forest absorbs them all. You remain with a group near a clearing where several paths converge. Oswin stands nearby. So does Perrin. The old hunter Malay leans on his spear and looks entirely unsurprised by any of this. A horn sounds. The hunt begins. At least officially. What follows feels less like legend and more like patient work. Voices call through the trees. Branches crack. Dogs bark. People move carefully between trunks. Hours pass. The forest remains largely unimpressed. A fox appears. Brief excitement follows. Then disappointment. The fox clearly has no intention of becoming a wolf and disappears before anyone can negotiate otherwise. The dog beside you watches all this with great interest. Its loyalty to the hunting effort remains somewhat theoretical. Around midday, a group of beaters emerges from dense brush reporting fresh tracks. Attention sharpens immediately. Hunters reposition. Dogs become excited. Several retainers attempt to look heroic. The forest continues being a forest. You follow Oswin toward a shallow valley where snow remains in patches beneath the trees. Here the tracks are visible. Several wolves. Not many. Not one. Enough. The signs move toward higher ground. The hunt shifts direction. For a while you hear only distant calls and barking. Then silence. Then more barking. The sounds drift through the woods unpredictably. No one can quite agree where the animals are, or where the hunters are, or where they themselves are, for that matter. The forest has a talent for rearranging certainty. Mallet chuckles. This is why wolves survive. Because they're clever. No, because men get lost. The answer feels entirely plausible. The afternoon grows colder. Cloud shadows slide across the woodland. A raven watches from a branch overhead. The hunting party gradually spreads wider. Some groups lose contact entirely. Others accidentally circle back toward places they visited hours earlier. One retainer emerges from brush covered in burrs and dignity-related difficulties. No one mentions it. Good manners remain important. Eventually excitement ripples through the forest. A distant howl. Dogs barking! Shouts. Movement. Hunters hurry toward the sound. You follow. Branches catch your cloak. Leaves crunch beneath your boots. The dog races ahead, then wisely returns when it remembers its professional limitations. The commotion leads to a ridge overlooking a narrow valley. Several hunters gather there. Looking, watching. Below, across an open stretch between trees, shapes move. Grey. Lean. Silent. Wolves. Not monsters. Not giants. Not creatures from tavern tales. Just wolves. For a few moments the entire hunt seems to pause. The animals cross the snow-covered ground below. Alert. Purposeful. Beautiful in a stark winter way. One stops briefly and looks back. Then continues. The sight lasts only moments. Then they vanish among trees. Gone. The hunters stare after them. Some appear disappointed. Others relieved. The dogs continue barking long after the wolves disappear. The Lord's retainers confer. Foresters study tracks. The hunt resumes. Yet something has changed. You sense it among the people around you. The wolves have become real. Not rumours. Not shadows. Not stories inflated by ale and darkness. Real animals moving through real woods. Dangerous, certainly. Yet ordinary in their own way. Even now it's hard to tell whether seeing them lessens fear or deepens understanding. As daylight begins fading, horns call hunters back together. Groups emerge from the forest. Tired. Cold. Mud-covered. The Lord's horse looks considerably cleaner than everyone else. This seems unfair but unsurprising. The results are discussed. Tracks found. Routes identified. Sightings confirmed. No dramatic victory. No triumphant ending. The wolves remain. The people remain. Winter remains. The hunt has revealed more than it has solved. You begin the long walk back toward town alongside shepherds, hunters, and foresters. The dog trots happily beside you. Mallet walks in silence for a time before finally speaking. Most folk fear what they imagine. He glances toward the darkening woods. Truth is usually smaller. You consider the wolves crossing the snowy valley. Lean. Quiet. Hungry? Real. Then Mallet adds, "Of course, smaller doesn't mean harmless." That feels closer to the truth. The forest fades behind you as evening gathers once more across the countryside. Ahead, smoke rises from chimneys. Bells prepare for dusk, and the road leads onward beneath a winter sky growing steadily darker. The road home feels quieter after the hunt. Not because people have stopped talking. Medieval people are far too talented at conversation for that. But because the talking has changed. The wolves are no longer rumours padded by imagination. They're no longer glowing eyes invented beside hearth fires, or impossible beasts stretched larger with every retelling. You've seen them now, moving through snow beneath bare branches, crossing the valley with the calm certainty of creatures that belong to the land as completely as rivers and winter winds. And that knowledge settles over the returning hunters like a second cloak. The sky darkens as you walk. A pale band of gold lingers above the western horizon. Frost gathers once more on grasses beside the road. Breath rises white from men, horses, and dogs alike. Somewhere behind you, deep in the forest, a raven calls before disappearing into the growing dusk. The town lies several miles ahead. The manor land spread between fields, hedges, frozen ditches, low stone walls. The familiar shape of a landscape that has fed generations and worried them in equal measure. You travel with Oswin, Mallet, Perrin, several shepherds, and a pair of foresters carrying bundles of marked branches. The dog moves comfortably among them all now, accepted without discussion. A shepherd carries a lantern. Its glow bobs gently over the road. The little circle of light seems fragile against the gathering darkness. Yet somehow it feels sufficient. Many things in medieval life are like that. One lantern, one bell, one loaf of bread, one repaired fence. Rarely enough to solve everything. Often enough to continue. As the road crosses a shallow rise, Oswin pauses. Tracks. Fresh snow has settled lightly in shaded places during the afternoon. Across one pale patch runs a familiar pattern. Wolf tracks. Not old, not ancient. Recent. The group gathers around them. The prints move diagonally across the road before disappearing into a stand of thorn bushes. No drama follows. No chase begins. The hunters simply study them. You notice something strange. A week ago these tracks might have inspired excited speculation. Now they inspire observation, measurement, understanding. Knowledge has replaced some portion of fear. Not all of it. Just enough. They crossed after sunrise, says Oswin. Mallet nods. Heading north? Perrin kneels briefly. They've been using this route for days. The tracks reveal a pattern, a habit, a path. The wolves have not appeared randomly. They move through the countryside according to needs, terrain, and opportunity. That realization feels important, because patterns can be watched. Watched patterns can be anticipated. and anticipated dangers become easier to live beside. The group continues. Soon the manor fields come into view. Smoke curls from cottage chimneys. Sheep cluster within reinforced folds. Lanterns glow near barns. The sight feels welcoming after the long day. People emerge to meet returning hunters. Questions fly immediately. Did you find them? How many? Were they large? Did anyone get hurt? Did the Lord shoot one? Did the dogs catch anything? The answers vary. Mostly no. Sometimes maybe. A few definitely. The truth, as usual, proves less dramatic than rumour prefers. Yet the news spreads quickly. Wolves seen. Tracks confirmed. Routes identified. Nothing defeated. Nothing solved. But something understood. Near the sheepfold, the old woman with the red cords listens carefully while tying another length of dyed wool. She seems unsurprised by everything. Perhaps age grants that privilege. Or perhaps she learned long ago that winter continues regardless of excitement. The dog receives another crust of bread from her. This has become a recurring theme. You suspect the dog may actually be managing the entire relationship quite skillfully. Night arrives fully. The chapel bell rings. People drift indoors. Lanterns appear in windows. The cold sharpens. You find yourself once more near the lower meadow where so many conversations have begun and ended. The repaired fences stand firm. Thorn branches bristle dark against moonlit frost. Sheep move softly within the fold. The world feels still. Not empty. Still. There is a difference. The reeve joins you briefly. He studies the fields stretching toward the distant tree line. Then he speaks. When I was young, I thought wolves were the enemy. You glance toward him. And now? He shrugs. Now I think winter is. The answer lingers. Because winter touches everything. Poor harvests, hungry livestock, thin game populations, long nights, frozen rivers, cold houses. Wolves become part of that larger story, not separate from it. The reeve eventually departs. The dog settles beside you. The moon rises higher. Silver light spills across the countryside. For a while you simply watch. Watching becomes easier now. The unknown has edges. You have followed tracks. Met hunters. Read records! Heard stories. Seen wolves with your own eyes. The fear remains. Yet it has changed shape. It no longer feels like a monster waiting beyond every hedge. Instead, it feels like weather. A reality to respect. A force to understand. A presence woven into medieval life. No one can quite agree whether that understanding makes the wolves less frightening. Perhaps it does. Perhaps not. But it certainly makes them more real. Far away, beyond the fields, a howl drifts through the night. Soft. Distant. Brief. The sheep stir. A dog barks from a cottage yard. Then silence returns. You listen. Not with panic. Not with comfort. Simply with attention. The howl belongs to the same world as monastery bells, market tolls, winter storms, pilgrim roads, manor courts, and smoky hearths. All of them parts of the same landscape. All of them shaping the lives of people who must wake tomorrow and continue. Hours pass. The stars brighten overhead. Frost thickens on fences. The moon traces pale paths across the fields. Eventually you rise and begin walking toward the Abbey Road once more. The dog follows immediately. Behind you, the manor settles into sleep. Ahead, distant bells wait beyond the darkness. And somewhere between these places, moving along old routes hidden beneath snow and memory, the wolves continue their nightly journey. Not legends, Not nightmares. Just creatures surviving another winter beneath the same cold stars. The realization stays with you as you walk. Because tomorrow, when daylight returns, you will follow those stories one final time. Not toward fear, toward understanding, toward the quiet truth hidden beneath so many winters of rumour. The Abbey Road lies pale beneath the moon, and you follow it slowly, with the dog padding beside you and the last manor lanterns fading behind. Ahead, the bell tower rises as a darker shape against the winter stars. The fields between are quiet. Frost has silvered the furrows. Hedges stand motionless. Far off, the forest rests like folded black cloth along the edge of the world. You carry with you the market's noise, the manor court's complaints, the chapel candles, Brother Aldrich's scratched parchment, and the sight of wolves crossing snow without malice or apology. By the time you reach the abbey gate, dawn is near. A novice opens the small postern with sleepy eyes and hair escaping beneath his hood. He recognizes the dog first, which seems fair, since the dog has made a strong impression on every kitchen within travelling distance. Inside the walls, the abbey sleeps lightly. One monk crosses the yard with a lantern. Smoke rises from the bakehouse. Somewhere a cock crows too early, as if eager to be wrong in public. Brother Aldrich is already awake. Of course he is. You find him in the guest hall, seated near a candle stub, warming his hands around a cup of thin ale. His ink-stained fingers rest on a wax tablet. He listens as Oswin speaks of tracks, crossings, the Lord's hunt, the wolves seen in the snowy valley, and the routes they seem to favour beyond the manor fields. The monk writes, "Not everything, only enough. Winter hard. Wolves seen near ridge. Tracks north of Manor Road. Flocks guarded. People fearful but watchful." The word seems small beside the experience, yet perhaps that is how memory survives, not as the whole fire, but as a coal carried carefully forward. No one can quite agree whether the wolves will remain near the settlements or drift deeper into the forest once weather softens. Some swear they will vanish after Candlemas. Others say poor winters leave long hunger behind them. Brother Aldrich only dips his stylus again and notes that watchfulness should continue. You eat bread in the guest house while the first bell rings. The sound rolls over stone, roofs, gardens, and frozen earth. Travellers stir beneath blankets. A pilgrim mutters a prayer. A merchant scratches at a flea and negotiates silently with despair. The dog sits near the hearth and receives a crust from a novice who pretends not to do it. Morning enters slowly, not dramatically. No grand victory arrives. No monster is slain. No final horn announces safety. Instead, life resumes. Monks chant, carts creak, bread bakes, shepherds watch the fields. Children carry kindling in pairs. A woman ties a red cord around a lamb's neck. A guard checks a gate latch. A clerk copies notes. A hunter sharpens a knife. A bell tells everyone what hour they have reached. And somewhere beyond the hedges, wolves move through their own morning, lean and cautious, following scent, path, and need. That is the quiet truth beneath the tale. The deadliest animal that haunted medieval Europe was not deadly because it hated mankind. It was deadly because it shared the same hungry landscape, the same winter, the same fragile edges between forest and field. It entered human life through sheepfolds, roads, prices, prayers, laws, and dreams. It became larger in stories because fear always needs room to stretch. Yet in the snow, beneath bare branches, it was also simply itself. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the wolf was beast, warning, punishment, neighbour, or nightmare? Perhaps it was all of these. Perhaps medieval people understood that better than anyone. By dusk you stand once more near the abbey wall. The sky is soft grey. Smoke drifts upward from the kitchen roof. The dog leans against your leg, warm and solid. Beyond the fields, the forest darkens. A distant howl rises, faint and brief, then fades before the bell answers. You do not feel safe exactly. Safety is a rare guest here, but you feel held by the small human things gathered against the dark bread, fire, wool, prayer, ink, gates, jokes, charms, and company. The evening deepens. The abbey windows glow. Inside, rushes are turned, candles are lit, bowls are filled, and travellers settle close to the hearth. Outside, winter folds itself over the fields. The wolves pass unseen through their ancient paths, and the people, knowing this, close their doors, bank their fires, and sleep as best they can. And now the tale softens. The bell grows quieter in your memory. The stone beneath your hand loses its chill. The smoke in the rafters thins into a gentle haze. You're no longer walking so much as drifting, carried by the warmth of the guest house and the low murmur of people settling into rest. The dog sighs beside the hearth. A candle bends its small flame. Brother Aldrich closes his book. Beyond the abbey wall, the road lies empty under frost, and the forest keeps its secrets without needing to explain them. The sheep are still. The carts are still. The market stalls sleep beneath tied cloth. The manor gate rests on its hinges. The chapel cross catches a little moonlight and gives nothing back but quiet. You draw the blanket higher. The wool is rough but warm. The straw beneath you rustles once, then settles. Somewhere far away, perhaps only in memory now, a wolf calls across the winter dark. The sound is distant, softened by fields, stone, smoke, and sleep. It does not come closer. It belongs to another part of the night. Here there is only breath, only embers, only the slow, kind dark. And as the last candle lowers into gold, you let the medieval world fade around you, the bells, the muddy roads, the cold gates, the watchfires, the whispered charms, the old fear, and the patient stars above it all. You are warm enough. You are sheltered enough. For tonight, that is plenty. So rest now. Let the wolves wander where they must. Let the abbey keep the hour. Let the fire settle low. And let sleep come softly, like snow falling over a silent field.